The alien ship dropped out of space above Earth like a falling star, but it didn't crash. It just hung there in the sky, bigger than any building humans had ever seen. For 3 days, nobody knew what to do about it. The military pointed their best weapons at it. Scientists tried to talk to it. Politicians argued about what it meant. Then the ship sent a message. It was simple and clear, in perfect English. We need to talk. General Jack Carter stood in the Pentagon war room, staring at the screen showing the massive vessel. He had fought in wars across 3 continents, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien ship had been silent for hours after that first message. Now they were coming down. The meeting happened in a small conference room in Colorado. It seemed wrong somehow, Carter thought. First contact with aliens. They were sitting around a plain wooden table like they were discussing the weather. The alien walked in without ceremony. She looked almost human, except for the blue-gray skin and eyes that were too large for her face. She wore a uniform that seemed both military and elegant. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of exhaustion. I am Commander Zara Vex of the Altarian Defense Corps, she said. I represent the Galactic Alliance. Admiral Lisa Kane, sitting across from Carter, leaned forward. Galactic Alliance? How many species are we talking about? 47 member species across 3 spiral arms, Vex replied. We have been at war for 300 years. Carter felt his stomach drop. 300 years of war, Earth had only just figured out how to leave their own solar system reliably. Who are you fighting? They call themselves the Hegemony, Vex said. Her large eyes seemed to dim. They believe biological life is inefficient, messy. They enhance themselves with machines until they are more computer than living being. They want to cleanse the galaxy of pure biological species. The room went quiet. Carter could hear the air conditioning humming. Outside, birds were singing. Normal Earth sounds that suddenly seemed very precious. Where do we fit in? Kane asked. Though Carter suspected, they both knew the answer wouldn't be good. Vex's shoulders sagged slightly. We are losing. Our fleets are scattered. Our best worlds have fallen. In perhaps 50 years, the Hegemony will have eliminated all biological life in the galaxy. She paused, and Carter saw something in her expression he recognized from his own worst moments in combat. Desperation. We need soldiers. Vex continued. Many soldiers. Your species has a population of over 7 billion. Most Alliance species number in the millions. You want to use us as cannon fodder, Carter said flatly. Vex flinched but didn't deny it. Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are simple, but you have numbers, and you can learn quickly. We can offer you basic training and equipment. Kane stood up abruptly. You're asking us to send our people to die in a war that's been going on longer than human civilization. Yes, Vex said simply, because if we lose, your species dies anyway. The Hegemony will reach Earth eventually. It's better to fight now, while the Alliance still exists. Carter had been in enough briefings to recognize truth when he heard it. Wasn't a negotiation. It was a last desperate throw of the dice by a losing side. How many do you need? He asked. As many as you can give us, Vex replied. We estimate 10 million soldiers would give us a significant advantage. The number hit Carter like a physical blow. 10 million people. That was bigger than most wars. In human history combined, Kane sat back down heavily. We'd need volunteers. The American military doesn't conscript for foreign wars. Foreign wars, Vex repeated the phrase carefully. This is not foreign, this is survival. Over the next week, the news broke worldwide. The reaction was exactly what Carter expected. Panic, disbelief, anger, and surprisingly, volunteers. Thousands of them in the first day alone. Captain Sam Rodriguez was one of the first to sign up. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and was looking for something more meaningful than training recruits. When he saw the footage of Hegemony attacks on Alliance worlds, cities turned to glass and populations simply erased. He knew he had to go. Lieutenant Amy Foster joined because she was good at solving problems, and this seemed like the biggest problem humanity had ever faced. She specialized in military tactics and had always been frustrated by how slowly the Army adopted new ideas. Sergeant Pete Jackson signed up because, As he put it, someone needs to blow things up, and I'm real good at that. His file was full of commendations for creative use of explosives in impossible situations. The training program started at a hastily constructed facility in Nevada. Alliance instructors arrived with equipment that looked like magic to human eyes. Energy weapons that could punch through tank armor, armor that could stop bullets and repair itself, communication devices that worked instantly across star systems. But the cultural clash was immediate and obvious. The Altarian instructor, Subcommander Kale, watched the human recruits with barely concealed disgust. They were loud, disorganized, and constantly asked questions that weren't in the manual. Worse, they argued with orders they thought were stupid. Human Rodriguez, Kale said during the first week of training, "Explain why you modified the assault pattern." Rodriguez stood at attention, but Carter could see the irritation in his eyes. "The original plan would have gotten half my squad killed, sir. The approach route was completely exposed. The plan has been used successfully by Alliance forces for over a century," Kale replied coldly. "Maybe that's why you're losing the war," Rodriguez said. The silence that followed was so complete, Carter could hear the desert wind outside. No Alliance soldier had ever spoken to a superior like that. What? But Rodriguez wasn't Alliance. He was human, and humans had different ideas about following orders that didn't make sense. Kale's face darkened. "Oh. You will follow doctrine precisely, or you will be removed from the program." "Yes, sir," Rodriguez said. But Carter could see he was only agreeing to avoid conflict. Not because he planned to follow stupid orders. The training scenarios were designed to test human adaptability under pressure. Alliance military doctrine was built on precision, timing, and overwhelming technological superiority. Each battle plan had been refined over decades to achieve maximum efficiency with minimum casualties, but the humans kept breaking the scenarios. In one exercise, Foster's unit was supposed to hold a defensive position until reinforcements arrived. Instead, they abandoned the position, circled around, and captured the enemy command post. When Kale protested that they had failed the objective, Foster pointed out that eliminating enemy command was more valuable than holding ground. Jackson's squad was assigned to clear a building floor by floor using proper breach procedures. Instead, they collapsed the entire structure with carefully placed charges and captured the survivors in the rubble. Technically, the building was cleared. Rodriguez consistently finished assault scenarios in half the expected time by ignoring safety protocols and using tactics that Alliance instructors had never seen before. His casualty rates were actually lower than the approved methods. After 6 weeks of training, Commander Vex visited the facility. She watched the humans train, with an expression Carter couldn't read. During the final exercise, she observed as human units consistently outperformed the computer models designed to predict their behavior. "They do not follow the patterns," she said to Carter, as they watched Rodriguez's team execute a perfect flanking maneuver that wasn't in any Alliance manual. "Oh," Carter agreed. "They don't. This troubles my instructors greatly," Vex continued. "They believe discipline is the foundation of military effectiveness." Carter watched as Foster's unit improvised a solution to a problem the scenario designers had intended to be unsolvable. "Maybe that's the problem," he said. That night, Vex sent a message to Alliance Command. Hey, the humans were ready for their first mission. But she wasn't sure the Alliance was ready for the humans. The war was about to change in ways nobody could predict. The transport ship carried them through space for 6 days before they reached the target. Captain Sam Rodriguez pressed his face against the small window and watched the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, but he couldn't tell which dot of light it might be. Everything looked the same in the deep black of space. "First combat mission," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, checking her equipment for the 10th time. "Are you nervous?" "Always," Rodriguez replied. "Anyone who says they're not nervous before a fight is either lying or stupid." Sergeant Pete Jackson was cleaning his rifle, even though it was already spotless. The Alliance weapons were strange to human hands, but they hit hard and rarely broke. "What I want to know is why this station matters so much." Subcommander Kale appeared in the doorway of their section. The Altarian officer still looked at the humans like they were a problem he had to solve. Omega-7 controls shipping routes. 212 systems, he said. The hegemony uses it to coordinate supply lines. Taking it will disrupt their operations for months. Rodriguez nodded, but something about the plan bothered him. It was too simple, too clean. In his experience, the enemy always had surprises waiting. The briefing room was crowded with Alliance soldiers from 3 different species. Altarians looked like tall, graceful humans with blue-gray skin. The Corvin were shorter and broader, with thick armor-like skin. The Thylan were thin and moved like they were underwater, with large eyes that never seemed to blink. Commander Vex stood before a holographic display showing Omega-7. The station looked like a giant wheel spinning slowly in space. The assault will proceed in 3 phases, she said. First, we bombard their defensive positions. Second, we board at these marked entry points. Third, we secure the command center and disable their communications. Foster raised her hand. What about their backup systems? Intelligence indicates they have redundant communication arrays, here and here. Vex pointed to spots on the display. Alliance doctrine calls for systematic elimination of each position. Rodriguez studied the hologram carefully. The entry points Vex had marked were obvious choices, well defended, but accessible. Too obvious, he thought. What about maintenance? Access. Kale frowned. Maintenance tunnels are too small for proper assault teams. But not too small for humans, Jackson said with a grin. The silence that followed was familiar. It was the same silence that happened every time humans suggested something that wasn't in the Alliance manual. Maintenance areas are not appropriate. For military operations, Vex said firmly, we will follow established protocol. Rodriguez wanted to argue, but he remembered Carter's advice. Pick your battles carefully. Save the real fight for when it matters most. The attack began exactly as planned. Alliance ships pounded the station's outer defenses while boarding pods launched toward the predetermined entry points. Rodriguez watched through the pod's small window as energy beams lit up space like a deadly light show. 2 minutes to contact, announced the Altarian pilot. Rodriguez looked at his squad. Foster was running final checks on her scanner equipment. Jackson was staring at his explosives with the expression of an artist admiring his tools. The other humans looked scared but determined. Remember, Rodriguez said quietly, we stick to the plan until the plan stops working. Then we do what needs. Doing, the boarding pod slammed into the station's hull with a crash that rattled everyone's teeth. The cutting charges activated, burning through metal in seconds. Alliance soldiers poured through the opening into a corridor filled with smoke. In flashing red lights, the Altarian assault leader, Captain Nex, moved his troops forward in perfect formation. They advanced, step by step, checking each corner and doorway according to doctrine. It was beautiful to watch, Rodriguez thought. It was also going to get them all killed. The hegemony defenders were waiting. He knew exactly where boarding pods would attach because Alliance forces always used the same entry points. Energy weapons filled the corridor with deadly light. 3 Altarian soldiers fell in the first seconds. This isn't working, Foster said into her communication device. We follow the plan, Vex replied. But Rodriguez could hear doubt in his voice. Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. Jackson, Foster, with me. Everyone else, keep them busy. Before anyone could stop them, the 3 humans slipped away from the main assault. They moved through the station like they were exploring a new building rather than fighting a battle. Foster's scanner showed a maintenance shaft 30 meters away. This is completely against orders, Foster pointed out as they crawled through the narrow tunnel. Orders that are getting people killed, Rodriguez replied. The maintenance tunnels were exactly what Rodriguez had expected. They ran throughout the station like blood vessels, connecting every important system. Better yet, they were completely undefended. The hegemony had never considered that attackers might use them. Jackson planted small explosive charges at critical junction points while Foster hacked into the station's internal systems. Her approach to computer security was uniquely human. Instead of trying to break encryption, she looked for mistakes and shortcuts that lazy programmers had left behind. Got it, she whispered. I can control environmental systems, lights, gravity, even the waste disposal. Rodriguez grinned. Can you make their lives difficult? I can make their lives hell. What happened next became legendary among human forces. The lights throughout Omega-7 began flashing in random patterns. Gravity shifted without warning, sending hegemony defenders floating into walls. Waste disposal systems activated, filling corridors with things nobody wanted to encounter. But the real surprise came when Jackson's charges exploded. He had placed them not to destroy vital systems, but to reroute power and communications in ways the station's designers never intended. Suddenly, the hegemony's own defensive weapons began targeting their own positions. In the main assault corridor, Captain Nex watched in amazement as the enemy positions went silent.
The perfectly organized hegemony defense collapsed into chaos.
His Altarian troops advanced easily, meeting no resistance. How is this possible? He asked into his communicator. Humans, Commander Vex replied from the command ship. She was watching sensor readings that made no sense according to any tactical manual she knew. Rodriguez and his team emerged from the maintenance tunnels in the station's command center. The hegemony officers there were so busy trying to understand what was happening to their station that they barely noticed 3 humans walking in. Through a wall panel, the fight was brief and one-sided. Jackson's explosives training included hand-to-hand combat. Foster might look like a technical specialist, but she had grown up in a rough neighborhood and knew how to handle herself. Rodriguez had been fighting since he was old enough to hold a weapon. When the station commander finally understood that humans had somehow appeared in his most secure location, it was too late. His enhanced brain, designed to process information faster than any biological mind, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the impossible situation. Station secured, Rodriguez reported to the Alliance fleet. The silence on the communication channel lasted almost 30 seconds. Then Commander Vex's voice came through, carefully controlled. Please repeat that, Captain Rodriguez. Omega-7 is under Alliance control. No significant casualties among our forces. Another pause. Rodriguez looked around the command center. Foster was downloading intelligence files while Jackson examined hegemony weapons with professional interest. We improvised. The debriefing afterward was tense. Captain Nex praised the humans' effectiveness, but questioned their methods. Subcommander Kale was openly angry about the violation of doctrine. Their Alliance officer seemed confused about how 3 humans had accomplished what should have required hours of careful assault, Commander. Vex listened to all the reports without speaking. Finally, she asked Rodriguez a single question. Do you believe your methods can be taught to Alliance forces? Rodriguez considered carefully. Some of it, maybe. But a lot of what we do comes from thinking differently about problems. Thinking differently, Vex repeated the phrase like she was tasting something new. Yes, ma'am. Alliance doctrine assumes the enemy will behave logically. But logic isn't the only way to solve problems. That night, Vex sent another message to Alliance. Command. It was longer than her previous reports and marked with the highest security classification. In it, she recommended immediate expansion of human recruitment and suggested that perhaps the Alliance needed to reconsider some very basic assumptions about warfare. Meanwhile, word of the Omega-7 assault spread through both Alliance and hegemony communication networks. The Alliance celebrated an impossible victory. The hegemony began emergency reviews of all their defensive protocols, but the real change was happening in the minds of Alliance commanders. I'd watched 3 humans rewrite the rules of engagement in a single afternoon. Some were horrified by the implications. Others were beginning to wonder what else humans might be capable of. The war was entering a new phase, though nobody fully understood it yet. What they did know was that the humans had just proven that sometimes the best way to win was to refuse to play by the established rules. Rodriguez lay in his bunk that night, thinking about home. Earth seemed very far away. But for the first time since joining the Alliance, he felt like 6 months after Omega-7, everything had changed. General Jack Carter stood in the Alliance war room aboard the massive station called Haven Prime, looking at star charts that showed green dots where there used to be red ones. Green meant Alliance, controlled. Red meant hegemony, controlled. There were a lot more green dots now. 18 successful operations, Admiral Lisa Kane said, reading from her report. 0 total failures. Average casualty rate 60% lower than predicted. Commander Vex nodded slowly. She looked different now, Carter noticed. Less exhausted, more hopeful. The hegemony is requesting reinforcements from their core worlds. They've never needed to do this before. Carter smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had seen the impossible happen too many times to be surprised anymore. They're scared, terrified, Vex agreed. Their entire strategy depends on predicting enemy behavior. Humans are unpredictable. The door opened, and Major Amy Foster walked in. She had been promoted twice in 6 months, something that normally took Alliance officers decades to achieve. Behind her came Colonel Pete Jackson, who still preferred being called by his first name despite his new rank. The Centauri Gate mission is approved, Foster announced. Full commitment. Every available ship, every trained soldier. Kane leaned forward. How many humans? 50,000 aboard the ESS Liberty, Foster replied. Another 20,000 spread across the Alliance fleet. Carter felt his stomach tighten. 70,000 people. If this went wrong, Earth would lose an entire generation of its best soldiers. What makes this different from our other operations? He asked. Foster activated a holographic display showing the Centauri Gate. It looked like a massive ring of metal and energy floating in space, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol ships. Size and importance. This gate controls access to 3 major star systems. If we take it, we cut off hegemony supply lines to their entire outer rim. And if we lose? Carter asked. We lose the war, Vex said simply. The Alliance cannot afford another major defeat. This is everything we have left. The ESS Liberty was humanity's first real warship, built with Alliance technology but designed according to human ideas about how ships should work. It looked wrong to alien eyes, more like a floating city than a proper military vessel. But it carried 50,000 soldiers and enough weapons to destroy planets. Captain Sam Rodriguez, now Colonel, walked through the ship's corridors and saw the faces of people from every part of Earth. Farmers from Iowa, engineers from Germany, soldiers from Nigeria, students from Japan. All of them had volunteered to fight in a war most of them barely understood. Nervous? Asked Corporal Dan. Murphy falling into step beside him. Murphy was new to the unit, recruited from a military prison where he had been serving time for creative interpretation of orders. It turned out that creative interpretation was exactly what the Alliance needed. Always, Rodriguez replied. This feels different, bigger, 'cause it is bigger, said Staff Sergeant Kate Williams, joining them. She carried herself like someone who had seen urban combat, which she had. Detroit had been a tough place to grow up, and it had taught her lessons about survival that worked just as well in space. They reached the briefing room, where hundreds of human officers were gathered. The plan was displayed on screens around the room, showing the Centauri Gate surrounded by more hegemony ships than anyone had ever seen in one place. Conventional assault is impossible, Foster explained to the crowd. The hegemony is concentrated. Their entire reserve fleet are expecting us to attack the gate directly. So we're not going to attack the gate directly, Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. Foster smiled. Exactly. We're going to let them capture us. The silence that followed was different from the usual Alliance confusion about human plans. This was shocked silence. Deliberately? Murphy asked. We're going to let them win? We're going to let them think they're winning? Foster corrected. The Liberty will approach the gate using standard Alliance tactics. We'll follow their predictions. Exactly. They'll disable our ship and bring us aboard their command station for interrogation. Williams frowned. Then what? Then we show them what happens when you bring 50,000 humans inside your most important facility. The battle began exactly as the hegemony expected. Alliance ships approached the Centauri Gate in perfect formation, following tactical manuals that were centuries old. The hegemony fleet waited patiently, their enhanced minds calculating the precise moment to strike for maximum effect. Commander Vex watched from the Alliance command ship as the ESS Liberty advanced toward certain destruction. Every instinct told her this was madness. but she had learned to trust human madness. The hegemony weapons opened fire with devastating precision. Alliance ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The Liberty's shields failed, its engines died, and it drifted helplessly toward the gate. "Perfect," Foster said from the Liberty's bridge. Around her, the bridge crew was working frantically to make their fake damage look real. "They're taking the bait." Hegemony ships surrounded the Liberty, their tractor beams pulling it toward the command station. The alien minds aboard those ships were already calculating how much intelligence they could extract from 50,000 prisoners. "Boarding parties incoming," reported the ship's sensors officer. "Looks like they're sending everyone, just like we hoped," Rodriguez said. He was suited up in full combat gear, but his weapons were hidden in maintenance compartments throughout the ship. "Remember, nobody fights back until the signal." The hegemony boarding parties entered the Liberty, expecting to find a defeated crew. Instead, they found corridors full of humans who seemed confused and scared. The enhanced soldiers processed this information and classified it as normal prisoner behavior. They were wrong. Foster waited until the hegemony forces had spread throughout the ship, then activated the signal. Every human aboard the Liberty suddenly stopped being a prisoner and became a weapon. The hegemony had studied human combat techniques from the previous battles. They had developed countermeasures for every tactic humans had used before, but they hadn't counted on 50,000 humans working together inside their most secure facility. Murphy led teams through the ship's ventilation systems, appearing behind enemy positions like ghosts. Williams coordinated attacks that came from directions the hegemony hadn't known existed. Jackson used the ship's own systems as weapons, turning lights into blinding strobes and gravity generators into traps. But the real breakthrough came when Rodriguez's team reached the Liberty's hidden cargo bay. Inside were computers loaded with a virus that Foster had been developing for months. It wasn't sophisticated like hegemony technology. It was simple, crude, and based on human understanding of how lazy programmers cut corners. "Connecting to their network now," Foster announced as she plugged the virus into the hegemony command station's computer systems. The virus spread through the hegemony fleet like wildfire. Not because it was cleverly written, but because it exploited assumptions that enhanced minds made about logical behavior. The hegemony had designed their systems to be efficient and rational. The virus was neither ship after ship began broadcasting random signals. Weapons fired at empty space. Navigation systems calculated impossible courses. The entire hegemony fleet descended into chaos as their own technology turned against them. "All ships, this is Colonel Rodriguez," came the voice over Alliance communications. "The gate is open. Repeat, the gate is open." What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. Alliance ships poured through the Centauri gate while the hegemony fleet struggled with systems that no longer obeyed logical commands. Human-led boarding parties captured ship after ship, using tactics that the enhanced minds couldn't process. Quickly enough to counter, the battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Centauri gate was under Alliance control. The hegemony had lost 2/3 of their reserve fleet. In the aftermath, as rescue teams pulled survivors from damaged ships, Commander Vex found herself standing on the Liberty's bridge with General Carter. The human ship was scarred but intact, and its crew was already planning the next impossible mission. "How did you know it would work?" she asked. Carter looked out at the wreckage of hegemony ships floating in space. "We didn't, but we knew their way wasn't working. Sometimes you have to try something different, even if it seems crazy. Especially if it seems crazy," Rodriguez added, joining them. Looked tired but satisfied. "The crazier it seems, the less likely they are to expect it." Vex nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand that human military thinking wasn't just different from Alliance doctrine. It was the opposite of everything the galaxy had believed about warfare for thousands of years. "What happens now?" she asked. Foster appeared. In the doorway, holding a data pad full of intelligence gathered from captured hegemony ships. "Now we take the fight to their home systems. And we teach them what happens when you underestimate humans." The war had reached a turning point. The hegemony's air of invincibility was broken, their perfect predictions proven wrong. More importantly, the Alliance had learned that sometimes the best strategy was to throw away the strategy and trust human creativity. As the fleet prepared to move deeper into hegemony space, Carter thought about Earth, his PLA. General Jack Carter now wore the uniform of Supreme Allied Commander, a title that had never been held by a human before. He stood in the expanded war room aboard Haven Prime, watching holographic displays show the state of the galaxy. The red zones representing hegemony control had shrunk dramatically over the past year. Intelligence reports confirm it, Admiral Lisa Kane announced to the assembled command staff. The hegemony is pulling back from their outer territories. They're consolidating around their core worlds. Commander Vex, now promoted to Admiral herself, studied the tactical displays. This is unprecedented behavior. The hegemony has never retreated on this scale. They're scared, said General Sam Rodriguez. The former captain now commanded all human ground forces across 3 spiral arms. Their whole system is based on being able to predict what we'll do. When they can't predict us, they can't fight us. Carter nodded, but something bothered him about the enemy's withdrawal. In his experience, desperate enemies were the most dangerous ones. What's our intelligence on their core worlds? Major Foster, now General Foster and head of Alliance Intelligence, activated a new display. This is Terminus Prime, their original homeworld. It's not just a planet anymore. They've turned the entire surface into one massive fortress. The image showed a world covered in metal and machinery, cities that stretched from pole to pole, defensive systems that could destroy entire fleets, and a population of billions of enhanced beings who had never known defeat. How do we attack something like that? Asked Colonel Murphy. The former prisoner had become one of the Alliance's most effective special operations commanders. We don't attack it, Carter said quietly. We make them come to us. But that plan changed when Foster's intelligence teams discovered something unexpected. The hegemony wasn't just retreating, they were changing. They're trying to create hybrid soldiers, Foster explained during the next briefing. Part machine, part biological. They think they can combine their logical thinking with biological unpredictability? Staff Sergeant Williams, now Colonel Williams, and commander of the Human Advisory Corps laughed. I still don't get it. It's not about being unpredictable. It's about being adaptable. What's the difference? Asked Admiral Vex. Unpredictable is random, Rodriguez explained. Adaptable is responsive. We don't do random things. We do whatever the situation requires. Carter studied the intelligence reports about hegemony hybrid soldiers. The early tests were not going well for them. Their enhanced minds fought against biological instincts, creating soldiers who were neither fully logical nor truly adaptive. They're trying to copy us without understanding us, he realized. Just like they've always done. Meanwhile, the Alliance was undergoing its own evolution. Human training methods were being taught to alien species across the galaxy. Some adapted better than others. The Altarians struggled with the concept of breaking rules. Their culture was built on precision and order. But some younger Altarians, like Sub-Commander Kale, who had initially despised human methods, were beginning to understand. I watched human soldiers train today, Kale reported to Admiral Vex. They were given an impossible scenario. Instead of accepting failure, they changed the scenario itself. That's against regulations, Vex pointed out. Yes, Kale said. But they solved the problem.
Ow!
The Corvin warriors adapted more easily.
Ow!
Their culture valued strength and effectiveness over tradition. When human methods proved more effective than their ancient ways, they embraced the changes. The Thylan found human thinking almost impossible to understand. But they were excellent at copying human techniques, even without understanding the reasons behind them. Across the Alliance,
military
academies were being restructured. Ancient textbooks were thrown out. New courses taught improvisation, creative problem-solving, and the art of thinking differently under pressure. But the real test came when Foster proposed the most audacious mission yet. We're going to infiltrate Terminus Prime, she announced. The silence in the war room was complete. Even Carter, who had learned to expect the impossible from his people, was shocked. Infiltrate, Admiral Vex repeated slowly. Not attack. Infiltrate. Exactly, Foster continued. Their entire defense is built around stopping military assault. But what if we don't come as soldiers? Colonel Murphy grinned. I like where this is going. Foster activated a holographic display showing Terminus Prime's massive cities. The hegemony has spent so much time enhancing themselves that they've forgotten how to be suspicious of regular people. Their society runs on efficiency and logic. They don't expect deception. What kind of deception? Carter asked, though he suspected he already knew. We pose as refugees, Williams explained, survivors from worlds they've conquered. They process refugees through their civilian systems, not their military ones. Rodriguez studied the plan taking shape. How many people? 5,000? Foster said. Small groups arriving over several months. We blend in, learn their systems, and wait for the signal. What signal? Admiral Vex asked. Carter smiled grimly. The signal to turn their own world against them. The infiltration of Terminus Prime began 6 months later. Human agents trained in hegemony customs and enhanced with basic cybernetic implants to blend in. Arrived as scattered refugees from supposedly destroyed worlds. Murphy led the first group, posing as survivors from a mining colony. His criminal background proved invaluable for creating false identities and forged documents. The hegemony's logical minds processed the paperwork efficiently and assigned the refugees to work details throughout the planet. Williams arrived next with a group of supposed technical specialists. They were assigned to maintain the massive computer networks that ran Terminus Prime cities. Within weeks, they had access to systems the hegemony considered completely secure. Rodriguez came as a former soldier seeking medical treatment for war injuries. The hegemony's enhanced doctors were fascinated by his primitive biological systems and gave him access to medical facilities throughout the planet. Foster was the last to arrive, claiming to be a data analyst whose world had been destroyed. She was assigned to work in the planet's Central Information Processing Center, where she could observe the hegemony's command structure without attracting attention. For 3 months, the human agents lived and worked among their enemies. They learned how hegemony society functioned, identified key weaknesses, and slowly began placing small devices in critical locations. The devices weren't weapons. They were transmitters designed to broadcast specific signals at predetermined times. Signals that would exploit the hegemony's reliance on networked systems. Phase 1 complete, Foster reported during a coded transmission to the Alliance fleet. All teams in position, ready for implementation. Carter stood on the bridge of the ESS Liberty as it approached Terminus Prime with the largest Alliance fleet ever assembled. But this wasn't going to be a conventional battle. Remember, he announced to all ships, "We're not here to destroy the planet. We're here to liberate it." The attack began with what appeared to be a standard Alliance assault. Ships approached. In formation, weapons charged, following predictable patterns that the hegemony had learned to counter over years of warfare. But as the defensive systems activated and began targeting the Alliance fleet, Foster's signal went out. Every transmitter the human agents had placed began broadcasting simultaneously. The signals weren't random. They were carefully crafted to exploit specific weaknesses in hegemony network protocols. Williams had discovered that the planet's systems assumed all internal communications were legitimate. Transmitters convinced the network that critical systems were failing throughout the planet. Suddenly, Terminus Prime's defenses began shutting down to protect themselves from imaginary failures. Traffic control systems routed vehicles into dead ends. Power grids redistributed energy away from military installations. Water treatment plants flooded districts with harmless but disorienting chemicals. In the chaos, Rodriguez's medical access allowed him to reach the planet's central command facility. Murphy's knowledge of security systems let his team disable alarms and surveillance. Williams coordinated with Foster to turn the planet's own communication network into a weapon against its defenders. The hegemony's enhanced minds, designed for perfect efficiency, couldn't adapt quickly enough to a world where their own systems had turned unreliable. They trusted their technology completely, which made them helpless when that technology began lying to them. "This is General Rodriguez," came the voice-over hegemony communication channels. "Terminus Prime is under Alliance control." The battle for the hegemony homeworld lasted less than 6 hours. Not because of superior firepower, but because 5,000 humans had convinced an entire planet's computer systems to stop working properly. When the Alliance fleet landed, they found a world in chaos, but largely undamaged. The hegemony leadership, faced with the impossible situation of their perfect world betraying them, finally understood what they were truly fighting against. It wasn't human weapons or human numbers. It was human thinking itself. The ability to see solutions where logic said none existed. Carter walked through the captured command center, where hegemony leaders sat in stunned silence. Their enhanced minds were still trying to process how their invincible fortress had fallen without a reel. The fall of Terminus Prime sent shockwaves across the galaxy that reached far beyond military circles. Admiral Jack Carter, now Supreme Commander of all Alliance forces, stood in what had once been the hegemony's most secure command center. Through the massive windows, he could see human engineers working alongside former hegemony citizens to repair the damage caused by the chaotic takeover. The other core worlds are requesting negotiations, Admiral Lisa Kane reported. She looked older. Now, after years of impossible victories that had taken their toll on everyone involved, 3 separate delegations have sent ceasefire proposals. General Sam Rodriguez entered the command center, still dusty from supervising ground operations. "It's not that simple," he said. "The hegemony is splitting apart. Some want to keep fighting, some want to surrender, and some want to try joining the Alliance." Carter nodded. He had expected this. When you broke an enemy's fundamental beliefs about how the universe worked, they didn't just change their tactics. They questioned everything they thought they knew. "What about the hardliners?" Carter asked. General Amy Foster, head of Alliance. Intelligence activated a holographic display showing the remaining hegemony worlds. Approximately 30% of their remaining forces are regrouping around the system called Origin. They're led by someone calling himself the Prime Architect. "Let me guess," said Colonel Dan Murphy with his familiar grin.
Yes.
"He thinks he can outthink humans by being even more logical?" "Exactly wrong," Foster replied. "He's trying to eliminate logic entirely. His forces are using completely random tactics, hoping unpredictability will counter our adaptability." Colonel Kate Williams laughed from her position near the communications console. "Random isn't the same as creative. Random is just ... random." Carter studied the tactical displays showing scattered hegemony forces trying desperately to find some approach that would work against human-trained Alliance armies. Some were attempting to copy human methods. Others were doubling down on pure logic. A few were abandoning strategy entirely. They still don't understand, he realized. They think there's some trick they can learn, some formula they can follow. "What should we do about them?" Admiral Vex asked. The Altarian commander had learned to think more like humans over the years, though she still preferred proper military organization when possible. Carter looked out at the mixed human and alien crews working together below. An idea was forming in his mind, something that would have been impossible at the start of the war, but now seemed natural. "We show them what they're really fighting against," he said. The final phase of the war began not with a massive battle, but with thousands of small operations happening simultaneously across 50 star systems. Alliance forces, now trained in human adaptive methods, struck at hegemony positions using completely different approaches in each location. On the industrial world of Forge 7, Colonel Murphy led a team that convinced the planet's automated factories to start producing Alliance equipment instead of hegemony weapons. They didn't hack the systems or destroy them. They simply filed the correct paperwork through bureaucratic channels the hegemony had forgotten existed. In the Kepler Nebula, Williams coordinated with Corvin warriors and Thiolan scouts to capture an entire hegemony fleet without firing a shot. They used fake distress signals, misdirection, and pure psychological manipulation to convince enemy ships to surrender to forces that didn't actually exist. Rodriguez commanded ground operations on 12 worlds simultaneously, using tactics that changed from hour to hour based on local conditions. His forces included humans, Altarians, and converted former hegemony soldiers, working together in combinations that created new fighting styles with each battle. But the most important operation was happening on Origin itself, where the Prime's architect had gathered the last true believers in hegemony superiority. "I'm going personally," Carter announced, causing immediate protests from his staff. "Sir, that's completely unnecessary," Admiral Kane argued. "We can take Origin with conventional forces." "No," Carter replied. "This isn't about taking another world. This is about ending a way of thinking that's been destroying the galaxy for centuries." Foster understood first. "You want to show them what human leadership actually means. I want to show them what any species can become when they stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be better." The approach to Origin was unlike any military operation in galactic history. Instead of a single massive fleet, Carter led hundreds of small groups that arrived from different directions over several weeks. Each group used different tactics, different technologies, and different species combinations. The Prime Architect's forces, trained to respond to chaos with even greater chaos, found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Every time they adapted to one threat, 3 new ones appeared that required completely different responses. They're not random. The Prime Architect realized too late, as Alliance forces systematically dismantled his supposedly impregnable defenses. Their coordinated chaos. Carter himself led the final assault on the Prime Architect's fortress. But it wasn't really an assault. It was a conversation. "I know what you're trying to do," Carter said, as he walked through the fortress gates that had been opened by Origin's own citizens. "Think if you abandon logic completely, you can beat us at our own game?" The Prime Architect, more machine than biological being now, struggled to process this direct approach. "Your methods are chaos. Pure, destructive chaos." "No," Carter replied calmly. 8. "Our methods are adaptation. We change based on what the situation requires. Sometimes that looks like chaos to minds that expect everything to follow rules. Rules create order. Order creates efficiency. Efficiency creates victory." Carter gestured to the Alliance soldiers around them, humans and aliens working together with an effectiveness that couldn't be measured by traditional standards. "Look around. Who won?" The Prime Architect's enhanced mind ran through calculations, probability matrices, and strategic assessments. Every analysis reached the same impossible conclusion. The hegemony had lost not because their logic was wrong, but because logic itself was insufficient. "What do you want?" the Prime Architect asked finally. "I want you to understand that there's a better way," Carter replied. "Not a human way or an alien way. A way that includes everyone." The negotiations that followed lasted 6 months and involved representatives from every species in the galaxy. The result wasn't surrender or conquest. It was transformation. The hegemony agreed to abandon their doctrine of biological inferiority. But they didn't simply join the Alliance. Instead, they helped create something new, the Galactic Confederation, where different approaches to problems were seen as strengths rather than weaknesses. Former hegemony worlds began experimenting with mixed populations where enhanced and natural beings worked together. Alliance worlds started incorporating useful hegemony technologies. Human adaptive methods spread throughout the galaxy, but each species modified them to fit their own nature. 5 years after the war's end, Carter stood in the newly constructed Galactic Military Academy on Earth. Students from dozens of species learned together, studying not just human methods, but the underlying principle that any problem could be solved. If you were willing to think about it differently, the most important lesson he told a class of mixed human and alien cadets isn't about tactics or strategy. It's about never accepting that something is impossible just because it's never been done before. A young Altarian student raised her hand. "But sir, don't some things have to follow rules?" Carter smiled. "Absolutely. The rule is this. When the old rules stop working, make new ones. When the new rules stop working, make newer ones. Never stop adapting. Never stop learning. And never accept that there's only one right way to do anything." In the back of the classroom, Admiral Foster watched the lesson with satisfaction. She was older now, her hair gray from years of impossible missions, but her eyes still held the spark of someone who saw problems as puzzles to be solved. After class, Carter found her looking out at the Academy's training grounds, where human and alien students practiced together using techniques that combined the best ideas from across the galaxy. "Any regrets?" she asked. Carter thought about the billions of lives saved, the civilizations that had learned to work together instead of destroying each other, the new age of cooperation that was spreading across the stars. "Just one," he said. "It took a war to teach us that we're stronger when we think differently together than when we think the same way apart." Foster nodded. "Maybe the next generation will figure that out without needing to fight for it." Below them, young humans and aliens worked side by side, learning that the greatest weapon in any conflict wasn't superior technology or overwhelming force. It was the willingness to imagine that impossible problems might have simple solutions. If you were brave enough to try something new, the war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. Across the galaxy, species that had been enemies were becoming partners. Not because they agreed on everything, but because they had learned to value their differences as sources of strength. The universe was vast and full of challenges that no single way of thinking could solve. But now it was also full of minds that had learned the most important lesson.